Okay, going live. Okay, cool. There's probably a bit of a delay on it, but that's
My thing says
okay.
that it's been live for like 7 minutes, so I don't know.
So it's live on the StreamYard thing, but not quite on
Ah,
the YouTube
YouTube,
thing.
sure.
Hey, YouTube people, I'm live. Y'all getting a notification? I'm just gonna double check it on my phone.
Yeah, I can do it if you don't want yours to crash.
Nope, it looks good. Looks like we're live. All right, gang.
Yeah, I see it there.
So today we're talking with Dennis Porter here about all things Bitcoin, all things El Salvador and their recent kind of move to make it a legal tender, and kind of the implications of that philosophically, what it means financially for the country, economically, and just I'm kind of making this new show. You're probably used to the recorded videos, but we're going to try to do a couple live events every now and then and get some people who are really eloquent about Bitcoin and everything about that. So we'll start first of all, Dennis. Maybe you could just introduce yourself and
Yeah,
let the audience know what you're all
I don't know
about, what your
about
background is,
I don't know
and
about
give us your
eloquent speaker, yeah, but yeah, definitely. I
you
think there's
are.
also a little
You have
bit
a
of a
podcast. By the
lag as
way,
well
Dennis has
there.
got a great podcast called Smart People Shit. Go check that out after. I'll drop a link. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a degenerate podcaster. I cut my teeth on Clubhouse, spent about 500, 600 hours on that app, nearly ruining all of the relationships in my life in the process in order to become someone that is at least halfway decent at speaking about Bitcoin. So I had a really, really good time doing that, though. Met a lot of amazing people, connected with a lot of some of the more prominent people in the space. It was a really great time I had doing it. And eventually, I'd always kind of had this dream that I wanted to start a podcast. I don't know why. Maybe that's just like a millennial thing to do. But as soon as I had gotten to a certain level, some people started telling me that I should start one. I'd been doing a lot of shows on there, so for the most part, most of them were panelist discussions. So I'd get all the people that are much smarter than me together in a room and have them discuss a specific topic. We've done rooms on NFTs, we've done rooms on Ethereum. We've done rooms on DeFi, on Bitcoin, all sorts of just like kind of more heavy. I called it deep dive. So that's why we did some
Oh,
more of
nice.
the more difficult topics to cover. But I'd get just like, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in a room sometimes and just let them hash it out and then like kind of let the audience come in and engage with us. So if you want to check it out, that's my podcast is called Smart People Shit. And it's on all the platforms. You'll be able to find it pretty easily. But I've been having a lot of success with it. Having a lot of great guests. I've had on Jimmy Song, Corey Clipston, founder of Swan Bitcoin. I've also had on one we talked about just earlier was Bradley Brettler and Craig Warmke. We did like a philosophical based type stuff. So it's been a really, really great time. And I got a little slowed down because of Miami, not just physically, but also with my schedule. So, but I'm got a bunch of guests lined up coming up here in the next few weeks, ready to get back at it.
Nice. Yeah, I find it so interesting. Like, I'll ask you first, like, what was kind of your life, I guess, before crypto and Bitcoin and all that? Because for me, like, finding this has definitely changed my career path and my ambitions and things. But like, what was Dennis before the Bitcoining?
So before Bitcoin, very long time ago, I used to do event promotion for bars and clubs. And I had to quit that career though, because it was very, very tough on my health. A lot of people know this about me, but I have a very severe form of epilepsy. And so that was developed from all of the massive amounts of drugs and alcohol and cigarette smoking and lack of good food and staying up till 4 or 5 a.m. every night. So eventually I had to leave that lifestyle because it was so devastating on my health. And I got into a lot of different things, but one of the biggest things that me and my partner got into was health and fitness. So we own 2 fitness studios now. And
Oh, wow.
along my journey, I've discovered a lot of different stuff when it comes to how to improve your health. Not just like working out, like there's a lot of different stuff that I've found along the way. So you'll find my show that I do. I also tend to do health-based stuff. I had on Dr. Jack, and we talked about vitamin D. I'm going to be having on, hopefully have on Sean Baker soon, Dr. Sean Baker for the carnivore diet. And then there's another guy I want to have on eventually, but haven't lined him up yet. But yeah, health is a big thing for me because, I mean, you could be a billionaire, and if you're not healthy, then your life is going to be shit. So health is wealth is kind of a big part of my show. But yeah, I jumped into Bitcoin 2017, keyboard warrior style on Reddit. Got into the block size wars. That was fun. Well, it was a pretty wild time, and I feel like I didn't do a lot of the talking. I did a lot of reading, and it's really what kind of galvanized me in my support for Bitcoin. I was able to actually sit there and look at the conversation between big blocks and small blocks, and I was like, it's obvious that it needs to be small blocks because if you increase the block size, you're going to have decentralization destroyed almost immediately. So that was a big time for me. And then I don't know, let's see, what did I do next? I jumped into mining. I did some mining for a while, to the point where it absolutely terrified my partner. She was like, if you buy one more fucking miner, I'm going to break up with you because this is getting insane. But I was building out my entire garage with these. He was getting a little worried, but I was going to go all. So maybe, I don't know. And it was in the middle of the bear market too. So, but yeah, Bitcoin has been a big part of my life now for maybe going on almost 5 years now, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. It's definitely had a massive impact on me as a person. I think that Bitcoin changes you is definitely it's a very accurate statement.
Yeah, it's interesting that you got into mining because I know I when I first got into Bitcoin, I kind of had that inclination too. It's just like, well, this seems like a no-brainer. And one of the things that I did is I fell for the cloud mining scam, where it's just like, oh, you can buy hash power somewhere else and they'll mine it for you. And it's just like, no, it didn't, because you just see like every day, it just you get less and less and less, and it never pays for itself. It's like if it did, they would never sell it, right?
Yeah, no, I saw those a lot too, and I was always doing the math on them and trying to figure out if they were actually profitable or would work. But yeah, inevitably, and I ended up just getting into the hardware stuff, which was really fun actually. I really enjoyed it, and it was something that I think gave me a lot of better understanding and expertise around Bitcoin. So it was a good time.
Do you have a background at all in like computer science, or?
No, I taught myself literally everything I know. I taught myself because I didn't go to college, and well, I did go for like what is it called? Like a trimester or something, wherever the school I went to. But I never really had any success with college. I'm kind of a child of the internet in the sense that everything that I know and understand I've learned on YouTube videos or from Reddit or somewhere on the internet.
Yeah, well, that was like, I covered that in the Michael Saylor video. Like now it's institutions have so much more competition because information is free. And that's kind of like probably the prime example of decentralization being effective, right? Like you have choice, people want, the degrees and stuff now, but even that's starting to fade away. Like the companies are no longer saying you need college degrees. They'll just make their own training courses for you, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. It's very accurate. It's a very accurate statement. Yeah. I don't know how education, institutionalized education is going to survive in the next, 50 years when everything that you need to know is on the internet. It's going to be really interesting to see how they are able to keep their profit margins high, to keep their numbers up.
Well, I think like the final thing for them was kind of this idea of campus life, like, right. And you look at what's happened with campuses, like they're putting swimming pools and all these things. And it's like, okay, well, you can learn anywhere, but wouldn't you rather learn at a place with all these amenities? And they poured all this money into these things. And I think now after a year of like Zoom classes, kids aren't feeling like, I don't know, we'll see what the numbers are statistically, but like you do a year of the Zoom stuff, you find different ways of learning things and teaching yourself and find a community. And it's like, are you going to jump back into a college life after that? Is that the reason that you go to college or university? I don't know. But no, it's interesting. I went to UBC, and like UBC is probably one of the biggest universities in Canada. And they put so much emphasis, especially in your first year, of like doing all these different events and getting acquainted with this and that. And you go to all these cool new buildings that they set up with these amenities. And then you go to the actual classrooms. Classrooms are like 40, 50 years old. The seats are breaking apart. And it's just like they put all the money into the fancy stuff and then none really into the education.
No, it's true. And then really, when it comes down to it, though, is the networking is probably what you pay for more than anything else, because you get a network with the educators and obviously anybody that they bring to the school, and then also the students as well is a big part. And this is also true with even some of the new things that are being launched in the crypto space. Pomp has that course that he launched, and it's like $1,000, and I was like, what? All this stuff that you can learn on the internet for free, right? But so I ended up go onto a podcast where there was 4 gentlemen who took the course, and I was thinking in the back of my head, I was like, I wonder if the best part about this course is the actual networking itself. And I was able to talk to them after the show, and they were like, yeah, definitely it was the networking, 100%.
Yeah.
We already knew pretty much everything in the course itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, getting in Pomp Circle, probably a pretty big deal for getting jobs.
Yeah, he does. That's a great point as well. Yeah, very, very much so networking, but also just for the getting into the radar of companies that are hiring, which is what they actually do. I think the whole thing is set up that way. It is a circular thing. He has that the crypto jobs company, and he has the training program. So he's plugged.
I always like to ask people this question relating to Bitcoin. Can you kind of name or remember like a singular piece of media or moment when it clicked with you? And like, if it was a certain thing that you watched or a certain person, like what was kind of your click moment with Bitcoin?
For me, from the very beginning, it was always this narrative that we need to bank the unbanked, or obviously we're all becoming unbanked at the same time. But the person that I watched the most was Andreas Antonopoulos. I got very fortunate to have him be one of the first people I stumbled across. And I just immediately started to digest all of his content, as all of his videos around Bitcoin and all the speeches that he gave. His book was the first one that I read. I mean, it's like pages are like falling out of that book because there really just wasn't that much content back then. So I love Andreas. I love what he has done for the space, and definitely some of the talks that he gave around Bitcoin and what the potential that it has to absolutely change the entire planet. So I don't always agree with everything that he says or does, but for the most part, he's a pretty solid guy.
Yeah, I think he was among the first for sure that I saw as well, like some of the YouTube lectures and things like that. Like I used to have this one, I can't remember one that he did, and I sent that video out to probably like 90 people. It's so funny, like when you first get into it, I don't know, I felt this way, is like you get so enthusiastic when that moment hits you where you're like, this is amazing. And then you try and kind of explain it to other people, and you find yourself at first like not being able to quite explain it well enough to people. And then you get better and better over time. You hear somebody else explain it. Like Pomp, I thought, has done a really good job kind of explaining it in really simple metaphorical terms. And I use a lot of like what he said to kind of, gateway people into it. But Andreas, for sure, like the people that have sat down and watched like the 20-minute video I've sent them of Andreas have been like, wow, okay, I see what this is all about now.
Yeah, he's an incredible speaker. He does a really great job of delivering the message of what Bitcoin's purpose is. Obviously, it's great to make money, and we all like to consider ourselves investors these days. But his ability to actually really drive home the point of just how valuable this technology is and what a difference it's going to make.
Yeah. So just personally, also, like, there's a lot of people obviously in the Bitcoin space, who produce content, and then there's a lot of like just passive people who are like, yep, I get the narrative, I get what you're saying, I'm just gonna buy it, I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna, have my piece. What kind of compels you to kind of want to teach others about it or like talk about it and tweet versus just kind of just passively investing and, doing whatever else you'd like to do with your life?
Yeah. So one of the big things that made a difference for me, because I'd always wanted to talk more about it, I just like to talk in general, so that's probably part of it. But was seeing Michael Saylor get out onto the public arena and just be so outspoken about Bitcoin and not worry about the way that it might impact him. So some people like him, some people don't, but his just zero fucks given, when it comes to being a public Bitcoiner was kind of one of the catalysts to me deciding to get out there and do it. If this guy's willing to put his entire career and everything that he has on the line, then, who am I? I'm just some pleb, who am I to worry about myself and my credibility? When this guy is, like I said, he's a billionaire, he's a publicly traded company CEO, and he has a whole life of accomplishments that he's, putting on the line, and I'm just getting started. So, I think personally, for me as well, though, that in my opinion, Bitcoin is the greatest invention in human history. For 10,000 years, humans have been using money. It's probably, most people would argue, historians would argue, it's the catalyst for civilization itself. And so for 10,000 years, we've been using it. And for 10,000 years, human beings in power have been corrupting that monetary supply. And I believe that for the first time in human history, we have the ability to stop that. And I think that that's going to have a huge impact, because every single time, if you look back in history, some of the worst events in human history have been in and around monetary debasement. So if you look at the collapse of Rome, I mean, we have all these charts that show us, and all this data that shows us that they were debasing their silver denarii for decades, hundreds of years, maybe even, and definitely hundreds of years. And it actually got so bad, the soldiers, the Roman soldiers, for the coins that they were being given, because they were so debased, and which is part and part led to the collapse of Rome. Not entirely, obviously, there was many other factors. Just like when America collapses, there will be many other factors, but historians will be able to look back and say that the debasement of the currency is a major contributing factor to that. But another one would be, for instance, like the transatlantic slave trade. So the reason why the transatlantic slave trade was so horrific in its ferocity and how devastating it was to Africa as a continent is because the Africans themselves were using glass agri beads, and these beads were considered to be precious by them, and so they used them as a medium of exchange, store value. But the Europeans knew how to make these beads, and so they were printing them into infinity, and then going into Africa and being like, hey, let us buy people, let us buy goods. And so they were able to basically pillage Africa of all of its precious wealth and precious human people because of this. And yeah, it probably would have happened anyways to some extent, but I mean, the degree, the severity at which it occurred was massively accelerated. So that one as well. And then you have like the rise of Hitler with the whole Weimar Republic. We all know that famous chart where they printed it literally to infinity, and you have the rise of Hitler and Nazism and all this stuff. So it just, to me, Bitcoin is the greatest invention in human history because it prevents extreme debasement, and extreme debasement is linked to the worst things that have ever happened in human history. So that's why I'm a big, huge fan of it. And I will pretty much, I think, probably spend the rest of my life promoting it, supporting it.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I think that thing you mentioned about the glass beads, it's similar to like the rye stones thing too. I think it was
exactly.
Yeah, where they were like making these, and then they found out how to kind of make the rocks the same, and it kind of ruined the whole thing. Yeah, and it's similar story with silver, where it's just like, well, silver works as a currency until there's enough demand that like they just mine it like crazy, and then
there's too much silver. Yeah, exactly. That's the problem with silver.
Like that's the big difference with Bitcoin, right? Is like you can throw as much resource you want into it. It's the same amount of Bitcoin being produced every day, according to like where we are in the halving cycle. Like no matter what the hash rate is, basically.
Yeah.
But that's it's really interesting. For me, I think it's something where I probably spent the first few years of Bitcoin wavering on it. And it really wasn't probably until like 2018, 2019 when I kind of sort of understood the more macroeconomic thing and how it's more of like a store of value. For me, initially, like it was about, I'll say it on the show. I won't say what I was getting, but it is now legal in Canada. I was using it for Silk Road stuff. So FBI or Canada's equivalent, come at me.
What do you guys have? What is it FBI? It's not FBI though. What is it up there?
I don't know. They don't, it's Canada.
Too secretive.
No one's going to bug me in Canada. Anyways, I got into it through that basically, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, and then I kept some, and I had a gross amount somewhere in a Silk Road wallet that probably got nixed or whatever. But the stuff, I was buying marijuana with it. It was illegal back in Canada back then. It's legal now. I shouldn't be at harm
Yeah,
with that.
you're
But
probably fine. No,
yeah, but no,
don't
like
worry. I
it
have
took me.
friends who bought much worse things than that on there. So
Yeah, yeah, I know some people who did. But yeah, like I got into it through that, and then I kind of, eventually started understanding it more as an investment. And then for me, for a while, it was like, oh, it's this speculative thing where it's just like the more people that join the network, the higher the price goes. There was no idea of like it beyond that. And then I kind of got more into the Bitcoinization of like, this is like the future of currency. Like, and with Michael Saylor, he really brought to light how there really is no alternative, right? Like how there's nothing really stacks up to Bitcoin, not gold, not real estate, not, stocks, like very little things compare in terms of like,
yeah.
Asymmetric upside, but also something to kind of hold your money soundly through space and time. And I had one of the, misfortunes of losing quite a bit to a exchange collapse. Like we had one in Canada in 2018, Quadriga.
Yeah.
And so I learned there too, like, the magic of Bitcoin is not keeping it on an exchange like you do with a stock, like you do with, real estate. It's like you can actually just hold it physically in a sense, but it's also, transmutable through time and space. And so, yeah, those properties are really interesting. And like, it's really hard to explain it to people. And that's why I always say, like, just buy it first. Buy it, hold it on your shake pays or whatever first, but like get the skin in the game, because that's going to be really what compels you to do the learning. You can hear me talk about it all day, but until you start like accumulating it and then, send it to a wallet, send it back and forth, then you'll kind of start understanding the power behind it. And then you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think it's really
the El
big,
Salvador
definitely
stuff.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but
Oh, no worries.
I think that you're right, though. I think it's just so big to make sure that you are self-custodying your Bitcoin. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's such a huge vulnerability, as you know, you're leaving it on an exchange. And
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of one of the things that makes Bitcoin so powerful is that you don't have to trust anybody and you don't have to depend on anybody. You can be completely self-sufficient. So, but yeah, you wanted to jump on the El Salvador stuff. That's a lot of amazing stuff going on there.
Quickly, I want to just ask you really quick about Bitcoin 2021 in Miami, because I had FOMO watching all you guys there. It looked like a great time. I think one of the things that makes the Bitcoin so like amazing is the community behind it. Some people look at us and they're like, oh, they're toxic. It's just a bunch of, white men spouting about hard money. But I see the energy there. I saw, I was watching the Jack Mallers speech at home and brought a tear to my eye. How was the energy actually being there? And like, how were the after parties and things like that too?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible energy. Everybody was very excited, which was so interesting because, the price is, you'd think the price is already at 200K by now by the level of energy that was at this event. I don't think nobody could care less, or people could care less that the price was where it was at. Especially once the Jack Mallers El Salvador news broke. That was some pretty incredible and an emotional period at the event itself. I was at the front row and able to watch him. And so it's just really, so that's the other one too, right? Is like Michael Saylor gave me the courage to come out, and then, but Jack Mallers kind of makes me realize that I might not be as passionate about Bitcoin as I think I am, because that guy is beyond passionate. He is totally dedicated to this project, and I absolutely love the work that he's done. So not everybody knows this, but my parents actually live in El Salvador, and they've been down there for 7 years or so, 7+ years. And what he's doing down there is just absolutely amazing for that community. And it's a tough place, man. I won't say it's a horrible place. It's been getting a little bit better, but it's a very tough place, El Salvador. So I'm really happy about what's going on. But yeah, to stick to the events and stuff going on at the conference, the after parties were crazy. It was wild. I think like freaking everybody got sick and stuff too, because everybody was so commingled. But everyone had a really, really great time. I don't think I met a single person. This is the craziest part. Like when you meet people on the internet, because I had spent a lot of time on the internet and on Clubhouse and talking to people. And usually when you meet people like in real life, you're like, oh, you're very different from what I expected. There's a little bit of that, but everybody was like awesome. Like everybody just was like solid. No, I didn't meet anybody that I was talking to on Clubhouse or on Twitter and was like, "Oh, you're like a scammer or you're like a fleecer," is what I like to call them. And so I had a really great time getting to know people that I met on the internet even better, and had just an absolute blast there. All the parties were fun. Some people said they didn't like the conference itself, but all the after parties were amazing, incredible, good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I gotta, well, for sure next year I gotta come down, but just seeing like the energy there, like that's amazing. And it's so nice because like, I think for a lot of people, it was the first big event post COVID. So you could really like, I think that energy kind of pent up there as well.
Oh yeah, it was definitely pent up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a few babies might have been made that week.
Yeah. So I want to jump into the El Salvador stuff a little bit here. We'll dive into some background in it, but basically for people who don't know, El Salvador, I think is it a week ago? It happened so quickly. Basically at the Bitcoin 2021 event, Jack Mallers kind of revealed that he was working with the president of El Salvador to kind of draft this bill up to make Bitcoin a legal tender there. And one of the reasons, you know, for it being really great in El Salvador is because they have a lot of remittances there, basically, where I think it's like 2 million El Salvadorians in the US. Remittances, you know, when you're sending money cross country, they take 30-50% fees. And so Bitcoin made a lot of sense in that regard in terms of having a solution to this, a way to send money that wasn't, you know, being picked at by middlemen. But there's a lot more to the story as well there. Essentially how all this is going to be made possible, if you know Bitcoin, you can only handle, I think it's 8 transactions per second. I could be wrong on that, but to have a whole country of, you know, I think it's like 4 to 6 million people transacting daily with this, it's not really possible on the layer 1. You can't, you know, be buying coffees and stuff and having that settle within minutes. So they use the application and the network that Jack Mallers has built called Strike, and that runs on the Lightning Network. And so I don't know a lot about the Lightning Network, but Dennis, I was hoping maybe you could kind of explain what exactly that is and like why, you know, why not just move all Bitcoin onto the Lightning Network, but maybe just explain a little bit to like an audience that might not know, like what is Lightning?
Yeah, sorry, I'm laughing a little bit because I'm sometimes I ask the same question. What the hell is this thing? So yeah, basically it's my basic understanding of it's a layer 2 solution. So similar to how you have like the multiple layers of the internet, you have multiple layers on Bitcoin. So the base layer would be, you know, what you understand Bitcoin to be today. Lightning Network is a layer built on top of that, allows you to have microtransactions. Typically, you can do bigger transactions, but it's meant for smaller transactions. And it allows, and it has a much higher capacity. So it allows up to 1 million transactions per second. In theory, obviously, it's not at that place yet, or it's not doing that yet. But it is. It's going to be built out. It is being built out. Has been built out. Is being used. It's an incredible advancement in Bitcoin technology. But Jack Mallers built an app on top, which is proprietary. So nobody really technically knows how it works, but you're able to use it as like a fiat on-ramp, off-ramp, somehow using like Tether. I can't remember. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's pretty incredible. So instead of someone having to go to, what is it? Like
a money mart.
Yeah, money mart or whatever they're called, to do a money order to send to El Salvador. Well, the process of that is like, you got to get in the car, go to the branch that you go to, pay the money, pay the fee, then they wire it, and then the person can go to the old grandma or whoever has to get in her car or the bus, travel on dangerous roads where there's gangs, and go pick up a 70 cents on the dollar of this money order, so that she can pay for groceries, versus where it's like with Strike, you can just tap a button and you can just send it, and it's virtually free and virtually instant. And then they can withdraw it at an ATM if they need to withdraw. Because a lot of times in El Salvador, the problem in El Salvador is that they don't accept, a lot of places don't accept digital money. Like it's not in the sense of Bitcoin, but like actual like dollars, because they're a dollarized country. So a lot of people use actual physical cash there in stores. But that's changing as well too. So like for instance, in El Zonte, which is where Bitcoin Beach is at, they have over, I think, 100 stores now that are accepting Bitcoin using Lightning. So that's a pretty big deal. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. I really didn't personally see what happened happening though with the Bitcoin legal tender law. I thought that was incredible that they made it a currency in El Salvador, which is really, really good for the people of El Salvador, because now you can spend Bitcoin, which they don't have the regulatory body set up to stop this anyways, but you can spend Bitcoin in El Salvador to without having to pay capital gains taxes. It's considered money, just like USD.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting too, because I've always thought like you kind of need both sides of the equation for anyone to want to accept it, right? Like, people can sell things for Bitcoin, but you also need to have things where people can get paid in it as well, or else it's kind of like, well, I'll take your Bitcoin, but I want to pay myself to buy goods, and not everyone accepts Bitcoin, so I got to cash it out. So with Lightning, let me just get my head around this a little bit. So it's this layer 2 solution, and so it can handle its own transactions. It still uses the same kind of like wallets and stuff, right? Like the same, public. You have a public and a private key when you're on Lightning, or?
So it's a different wallet setup. So you have you have a Lightning wallet, and you have like a Bitcoin wallet. But I mean, they both use Bitcoin. The Bitcoin doesn't necessarily ever leave the network. It's just that it's almost like a side. Think of it like a side channel almost, like for your Bitcoin. So, but you do have to have a different wallet for it. So you have to open up a Lightning wallet, and you can have custodial or non-custodial. If you use a custodial, it's much easier to set up, but obviously there's problems with that. So
yeah, like you have to have a node, from what I understand, to do like a Lightning wallet, right? Like non-custodial.
To do non-custodial, I don't think you have to have a node. I just think that you have to. There's a totally different set. I honestly, like I said, I ask myself sometimes too. How does this work?
I'll just ask you one more question, just because I'm curious. But so all the transactions though that go on the Lightning network, is that still stored somewhere on the Bitcoin blockchain, or is that like, how does the Bitcoin blockchain keep track of like the Lightning transactions? Like
so you keep track of them
kind of like in one big clump, and then it goes into a Bitcoin block at one point, or?
So you keep track of them between users. So it's not really something that's tracked on the blockchain.
Oh, okay. So it's not quite like there's no like block explorer for Lightning, basically.
Not that I'm aware of, no. But again, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a technical expert, so I wouldn't, I'm sure there's probably some way to track some level of it, but I do know that one of the advent or the benefits of Lightning, and people have been talking about this, is that it does increase your anonymity. So I know that it doesn't, like, every time you send something, it doesn't get recorded on a blockchain.
Right. That was kind of one of my concerns with it, though, too, because at the same time, you're losing some of the features of Bitcoin. Like you gain that, extra throughput, but it sounds like you lose some of the core tenets, like the pseudonymity, and then I think also,
well, you gain pseudonymity. You gain anonymity. Because there's no, like, it's not occurring on the blockchain. It's not occurring.
Yeah.
Like, so it's much harder to track.
But it also kind of implies a little bit more centralization, for what I understand too, because like it sounds to me like Strike kind of has like a sweetheart deal going on in some sense with El Salvador. Like it will likely be the custodial wallet of choice for El Salvadorians, so it can become a single point of failure. Now, if let's just say they get attacked in some way, or like, do you think there's a problem there with having El Salvador use it?
So they're building their own wallet out for people in El Salvador. They have one that they've been working on exclusively through Bitcoin Beach, and it's a custodial wallet right now, but they want to move eventually to get everybody non-custodial, just because they understand the negative side effect of potentially having to control people's money, which means that something could happen. But Lightning Network is not centralized. It's very decentralized. I mean, if you can go look at the chain, sorry, not the chain, but there's like a graphic that people have made, many different types of graphics to show the way that the Lightning Network has been built out. And it's extremely decentralized. There's no like that. It's kind of an old like attack to say that Lightning Network is centralized, like it's a hub and spoke, but that's not accurate. It's very decentralized.
Well, I think one of the things though that like I would have concerns about, and it's from like a place of consideration for what Bitcoin's all about, is like if Strike is kind of the native way that people are sending money through El Salvador and merchants are using it to, buy and sell things, then like, doesn't Strike become a target for an attack? Let's just say like, the US could say, we want to ban this app. Then do remittances basically like end up being next to impossible? Like, yeah. Do you see any shortcomings with that?
I mean, it could be possible. I'm not sure. I've not heard of someone lobby an attack like that, or try to bring up an attack like that and see what people think. But I don't think it prevents people from using Bitcoin. Either way, they're going to be able to use Bitcoin.
No, yeah. I mean, for remittances too, like it doesn't matter if you need to wait a couple hours anyways for like the main chain. But no, I'm just thinking like I want to dig into it more myself, but like understanding what Strike's all about, I can't even access it. Like I think you can get it down in the States, but I can't get it in Canada. So I have no clue what it's all about. And they're still in their like startup phase. So they have very limited like media in terms of like explaining all that stuff. And Jack Mallers is still doing his rounds on podcasts. So I'm trying to kind of like get it all in, because I think it's like that's so critical. I think Strike is, Michael Saylor says this a lot, like in terms of transactional capacity, like it's all going to be layer 2. So whether it's Strike, whether it's Cash App or Square, my kind of prediction is like each one of these companies is now on like a global mission to find like the next third world country and be the one to make the deal with the government to kind of have them as, the partner in bringing this thing on. It's amazing to me that like Jack is, like a 25-year-old, and I think this is his like first major company, was able to kind of like render up that diplomacy. I'm sure there's a lot of people with Bitcoin Beach that also help make that happen. But to me, that's like a huge feat. But I think a lot of these other companies are looking at that being like, there's a land grab opportunity here as well.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Bitcoin Beach was a big part of what happened there for sure, because I don't think that, first of all, Jack Mallers or Peter McCormick or any of the people that went down there, none of them would have been down there at all if it hadn't been for Bitcoin Beach and what Mike Peterson was doing. So in my opinion, that I think what happened was you saw this incredible groundwork being laid by Mike Peterson and Bitcoin Beach crew. He has a lot of people that, they work with, a bunch of people on the ground there. So they kind of were the test case for showing how and why it could work. And President Bukele even said that if it wasn't for Bitcoin Beach, that this might have never happened in the first place. So, I would give a lot more credit to Mike Peterson, and then obviously Jack Mallers, big piece, and then Peter McCormick has been a very big loudspeaker for that program, and I think he's been going down there for a couple of years now, and he really shined a light on what was going on, and that's part of the reason why I ended up, part of the reason why Mike came on my show was because of Peter McCormick, but part of the other reason was because my parents live down there and they know him. They've known him for 7 years. So, so I was able to get him on the show. So and then I hope to go visit here soon. I want to go visit El Zonte and check out the town down there. Like I said, they've got over 100 stores already that are all accepting Bitcoin using Lightning Network. They have their own app that they got built out. So it's different. The way that they're using Lightning Network there is more advanced than even here in the United States. So instead of you going to the store and saying, send me an invoice, because that's how Lightning Network works, is you have to go and say, hey, I want to buy something, send me the invoice so I can pay for it. Instead, what you can do is there's like a little map inside the app, and then you can click on things like a menu and create the invoice yourself, pay for it. That way, like if, the guy's at the store making burgers, he doesn't have to like stop doing what he's doing to set up an invoice for you. You can just create your own invoice. So it's a pretty big advancement. But yeah, in my opinion, this is just the first of many countries that are going to end up adopting Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been having such a massive impact already on El Salvador. So in El Zonte and the surrounding areas where they've been using Bitcoin and paying people in Bitcoin and letting people spend Bitcoin, they've noticed that a lot of the kids there are actually staying focused on working and getting their jobs. And also, a lot of them are staying in the country and hoping to stay in the country, versus like most people are like, I want to leave, I want to go to the United States because there's nothing here for me. So there's they feel like there's a lot more opportunity and hope now finally in that country, which is pretty incredible, because really all you're doing is just adding a new type of money, right? So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing that just by adding a new type of money, by adding sound money to a civilization or a culture that you people are actually changing. Mike even told me in the podcast that I did with him that there's families there that are staying together and that kids are not joining the gangs there in El Salvador. So it's having an absolutely incredible impact on people. And to me, it's like, I don't see any of the altcoins doing this. I just see Bitcoin doing it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a big part of that is the community. Like so we differ on this because I don't have moral objections against altcoins as a whole. I just see them as like venture investments. I think it's wrong to call them even coins or cryptocurrencies. You're buying equity in a company that says it's decentralized, and most of them are not. But where was I going with this? Basically, like when it comes to Bitcoin in El Salvador, like I think Bukele himself, I was kind of looking up a little bit of history. Like he came in with plans to kind of already get rid of crime, and I think Bitcoin institutes like a next level of honesty in terms of how people are doing things. And when you bring in and you're attracting talent, actually, so he's really reversing course. Everyone's leaving El Salvador, prior to this, trying to escape the country. Now it's like a 180 where you're going to have a whole bunch of Bitcoin entrepreneurs and exchanges and people coming in. They're going to naturally, like, I think, crime itself is going to just get weeded out based on that, right? Those big populations coming in. I wanted to cover a couple things about hyper Bitcoinization, and maybe just for the audience, maybe you could just explain what that concept is, and then I'll just ask you some questions about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, hyper Bitcoinization is just where in a world where, right now it's a fiat world, and most Bitcoiners see that eventually the world will be dominated by Bitcoin, and there will be a transitory period where we believe it'll happen really rapidly. So you will see all of a sudden everything is priced in Bitcoin. You get paid in Bitcoin, pay taxes in Bitcoin. Pretty much everything is Bitcoin, right? And that's that process between fiat world and full blown Bitcoin world. We think will happen super rapidly, and that's why people call it hyper Bitcoinization. And I think that that's a basic explanation around hyper Bitcoinization. I think that you'll see a lot of things change though outside of Bitcoin. It's outside just the money that we use itself. For instance, like what happened in El Salvador with the way people are changed and the way kids are not joining gangs. So you're going to see, I think, in America, some pretty rapid socioeconomic changes occur as well. In my opinion, some of the good ones will be that real estate will become much more affordable. For a long time now, many people have used real estate, especially American real estate, and you have the same problem up in Vancouver, Canada right now.
Yeah,
and people are using it as a store of value, and not just us, like people that live there. It's foreigners with massive amounts of money are buying up those real estate markets, or banks, whoever, right? They're buying up all the real estate, and it's extremely expensive. And I think, in my opinion, because Bitcoin is so much better of a store of value than real estate, that it'll carve off part of the premium on homes that make them so expensive. So that will be one benefit of a hyper Bitcoinized world, is that real estate in general will be more affordable again. Another one, I guess, like if you want to talk about it for a little while, I guess, is that so it'll impact wages. So instead of you as an employee being in the position to constantly have to negotiate your wages up because the government is constantly debasing them. This is why they have the whole, fight for 15, the whole in America, that's like a fight for $15 an hour, which is, and now they needed to go
now
up again.
it's a joke now. It's like, well, 15's like, that's McDonald's wage now.
What's crazy is I went to a food cart recently, and they're offering $25 an hour for a food cart job. I'm like, that's freaking crazy. So, so in my opinion, what will happen is, because you're moving from a inflationary currency to a deflationary currency, it'll actually flip the script. So instead of you having to negotiate your wages up, your employer will actually have to negotiate your wages down because they're deflationary, and they're, in order to stay open, they're going to have to be in that position, and which is great because now you're, as an employee, you are in the power seat and you are in a position to be able to negotiate better, versus where, like, if you're at $15 an hour and you need to go to 20, it's totally up to your employer whether or not they change your wages or not. So those are some things that are going to change along the way that I think is why it's so important that we move to a hard, scarce, deflationary money.
So on that point, when you're talking about deflationary, that's where I kind of contend, and I know that you brought it up in your podcast with Craig Warmke and Bradley Rettler, is kind of like, we have so many things that we have today because of inflationary currency. Good things, I would say, because governments have just printed money and they've given them out to innovators to kind of do what they do. And they've given tax breaks here and there. And some people say, like, well, they don't need the tax breaks. But, you know, I think, like, I'll give you an example. Like, companies like Uber.
Are you a Keynes? Are you a Keynes? Are you MMTer?
No, but I like Uber and I like getting things delivered to my home. And I think if you move to a society like that, you know, what happens to innovation? Like, what do you think happens to innovation if we have a deflationary currency? A lot of things can't get funded. I agree. I still would rather see Bitcoin as a currency, but what does that transitory period look like? How do people move from expecting stimulus to now having to really, you know, be cautious about how they spend their money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be a difficult time.
Like, I think it's good for the individual. I think the great thing about having Bitcoinization is, like, if your money is sound, you're a lot less likely to buy frivolous things. But if we have people who are not spending money on frivolous things, then I think you kind of create like a bit of a deflationary spiral in some sense. No?
There we go. You're back.
Yeah.
There. It cut out for just a second. No. So, like, there was a few things you said in there though, but so the problem that I have with making this claim that, like, innovation will be stifled because of moving to hard money is, like, I guess I just don't agree with that premise. I think that money actually in a deflationary environment will do a better job of finding true innovation. So in an inflationary world, like, you can just basically put your money wherever you want, anywhere, and it will go up in value because they're printing money so quickly that it's better to, you know, store it into some stock than to actually look for a good investment opportunity. So it actually distracts and creates bad price signal for the market, and it confuses investors into thinking that, oh, I'm making a good investment in this company because it's going up in value, when in reality, the debasement of the currency is so aggressive that that's why those stocks are going up. I think like 20% of the S&P 500 are like zombie companies. So they're like underwater in debt and they're not producing really anything. So I think that you'll see actually a better allocation of capital towards companies that are actually creating and innovating. And you'll see capital be pulled away from companies that are not, because you're not just going to get gains from owning stock of a company because they're buying back their stock and the government's loaning them money and the US dollar is being debased. So I think that it's going to be in a post-Bitcoinized world that you'll see better allocation of capital towards innovation, and then thus you'll see more and superior innovation as well.
It's an interesting point, because I know, like, when I was reading the Bitcoin Standard, they talk about the golden age, and that's kind of, you know, I think like Rome and a couple places where they've had sound money, and the exports that come out of a society with sound money are, number one, like peace and prosperity, and that you know, we know that it only lasts so long. That's my other question too, is like the times that we have dealt with sound money, the things that we get out of it are like arts, culture improve, right? It's almost, when people talk about UBI, they talk about all the benefits of what would happen if there was sound money, ironically, because UBI is all, you know, based on inflation. But when you have sound money, historically, you've had, you know, basically renaissances in terms of arts and culture development. I don't know if the same goes for technology. I don't know if there's like a way to measure, like, well, if, you know, you have sound money, technology doesn't develop X as fast as if you're able to, you know, pay people and have a different economic system. But how do you kind of cope with that as well? Because I think the places that have done sound money through, let's just say, gold, or have had those other things like beads and whatnot before they were kind of ruined, they always come to an end. If we go to a Bitcoinized world, what stops people from just reversing it? What are the fail safes for actually making it stick more than like a few years?
Well, I mean, if you look at, you brought it up, but it was in Italy, they had the gold florin during like the 1400s to I think like the 1700s, and it lasted.
Right?
So it lasted for like several hundred years, and people argue that historians argue that the reason we left the Dark Ages and went into the Renaissance was because of the period in history where we had sound money. And the Renaissance itself was one of the greatest explosions in technology. So I don't know what you mean by technology. I guess technology to a lot of times to people today means like phones and computers, but like there's all sorts of different types of technology. We had massive advances in math and science during the Renaissance. And a lot of the math and science that we know today was built off of the math and science that was discovered during that period. Part of what happens when you have sound money is you create an environment where people aren't like on the rat race, and they're able to kind of like sit and actually like plan like 100-year, 200-year long projects. A lot of the cathedrals were built during that time because people were just able to think much further and plan much further into the future because they had sound money. And so I think that if we go back to a sound money standard, which I think is inevitably that we will be doing that with Bitcoin, I think that you're going to see absolutely just incredible advances in all fields, which will lead to advancement in technology as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, when we get there, it will be protected by and large the people, because when the people see the prosperity, they're going to make sure that the people elected to, run governments are kind of there to ensure that that standard sticks around. One of the things I've kind of noticed, and I think a lot of people are noticing too, is a little bit more of the politicization of what parties, specifically in America, are backing Bitcoin and which ones are not. I think everyone has kind of seen like Elizabeth Warren come out against it with a whole bunch of misinformation, but it kind of feels like a little bit like the left is positioning themselves against it versus the right, which is keeping a bit more of an open mind to it. How do you kind of see that playing out? Because for me, and I asked a question, but I'm going to go on a little tangent here. One of the reasons that I really got interested in Bitcoin was when I was in high school, I was going through like, I was watching all the stuff with Occupy Wall Street, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, we're finally figuring out how to stick it to the man. That whole thing fell apart. And I think a lot of people since then have been looking for kind of, an outlet to kind of take on the man. And I think Bitcoin works to that regard, despite a lot of hedge funds and people now speculating in it. But I think Bitcoin is kind of that solution to money printing, the elite, some of the things like that. And I'm kind of see a bit of that energy, but it's a different crowd. Occupy Wall Street was leftists. A lot of people, there were some sound money enthusiasts there, but Peter Schiff was there making fun of them. The people that align themselves with Bitcoin, very much in part like libertarians, conservatives. There are, I would say there are people on the left that are for it too, but it does seem that the political parties are trying to take misinformed stances on it. Do you see that becoming a problem in terms of like the advancement of it? Or like if you were to play out the game theory in your head, how does Bitcoinization work in terms of legislation and getting to like the top annals of the government?
So yeah, it's an interesting question because I have noticed that myself, that Bitcoin tends to be more approachable by those on the right and like I would say center, maybe like libertarians. But the funny part is that Bitcoin as a technology is extremely left in the sense that it is a public good. So people that they want to see things owned by the community should be majorly in favor of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is itself is owned by the community. So that's one big aspect. It very much is as a tool against those in power that have been trying to control and manipulate the monetary supply, and the whole Occupy Wall Street movement it touches on that very much so. But the other thing that I really like about Bitcoin that I think that a lot of my liberal friends and family members kind of miss out on, though, is this aspect that it gives you everything that you want, everything that you wanted as a liberal, everything that you, as a person on the left, that you've been fighting for. It gives you that. So it gives you cheaper real estate, affordable real estate, which is something that they've been fighting for a very long time. It gives you a better structure for wages, which is something that we were just talking about that they've been fighting for a very, very long time. And everything that, and it also empowers people equally. So like, if you are African-American, if you're white, if you're Asian, if you're Latino, like, it doesn't matter. If you're gay, if you're straight, like, Bitcoin sees everyone 100% equally. There's no advantage to be had by anyone. The code doesn't judge. It's incapable of doing that. So it's very equalizing. It gives cheap, affordable healthcare. It improves the wage situation for employees or employers. It's a publicly owned good, which is basically like a form of socialism, if you think about it. Like, I actually still don't understand why those on the left haven't like buddied up to Bitcoin in a serious and major way. Part of it is probably also because of the same way that people say libertarians really like Bitcoin, but I actually, a lot of the Libertarian Party members and people that actually run the organization, they don't like Bitcoin. And part of it is because I think that the issue is that it almost like takes away their thunder. Like, they don't want to support Bitcoin because they want to have something to go win an election with. They have something they almost need to be offended about or be upset about, which is, I understand. Yeah. That's the whole point of politics, right? Is like, the reason why one party gets in power over the other is because they're more pissed off. And so if you take away all the things that are pissing them off, like, they're not going to have any power. So it's all power struggle stuff. But in my opinion, Bitcoin is money for everybody. So if you look at any sort of ideological alignment, you can find a way to advertise Bitcoin to them.
Yeah,
maybe except for Marxists. That's probably the only one because they don't believe in profit. So.
I think what you mentioned is really important. How it's a different rerouting of getting to the goals of liberalism, and it's interesting. I don't think I've heard many Bitcoiners talk about it like that, and I feel like that.
Yeah, it's probably one of my things. Like, I try really hard, work really hard to find ways to talk about Bitcoin to increase, almost like create new narratives around it. Like, that's kind of my big thing. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I spend a lot of time doing that on the internet, and that's probably why people follow me, I guess. I don't fucking know. But that's one of the ones that I've been working on personally. That everything that you just heard me say is stuff that, I stand on the shoulders of other giants out there who are infinitely better than me than speaking about Bitcoin. For instance, like Andreas himself is a lefty, man. He's a big time liberal. So I'm surprised that he doesn't spend more time talking to his cohort about it in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of the time people don't want to associate any politicization to it. Like, the magic of it is that it's apolitical. It shouldn't have to appeal to anyone in that regard. Like, it's like, you find what you find out of it. But I think it's like, it's kind of like the duty of people to, I think it's like, I'll bring up an interesting conundrum, because like, we talk about the Bitcoin Mining Council, a lot of people are like, should we have it? Should we not? For me, it's like, they don't have any power over the network. I don't see anything to fear. As long as they're not spreading misinformation, I have no problem with it, right? If miners want to coalesce and create shit, we'll figure it out. That's what the Bitcoin network does. But I think it's good to have almost like bodies of people to explain things to people, because people need to coalesce around something. One of the problems of decentralization, I find, is like, you kind of have like an aimlessness. I think people naturally gravitate towards leaders and things. And so in the Bitcoin space, people, they try and find leaders. That's why we have all these different influencers for one reason or another. And yeah, I think having that voice is really important, to get like a leftist perspective. I'm not against any voice in the Bitcoin space, honestly. they'll have their audience as long as they're not lying about things. As long as you keep it honest, they're good.
Yeah,
Right?
it's funny because I'm not religious anymore, but I remember a lot of things from the Bible, and one of them is where the Hebrews are like desperate for a leader, and God's like, "You don't need a king. Like, you don't need a king." And they're like, "No, we really want one. We want a king. Like,
Yeah.
give us a king." And then the kings always obviously end up coming out and making big mistakes, and it's kind of screwing people over. So it's just interesting that it's the same way right now. People just don't change, and they want a leader, but inevitably those leaders are going to screw you. So hopefully, I don't know if you can change that about humans, man. I really don't know if you can change
I don't think
that.
so.
Some people just need a leader, but if anything is going to change that, it would be Bitcoin. It's just going to take.
Yeah.
It's just going to take a long time. I The problem is that I think one of the biggest reasons why people like leaders is because it helps to shove off thoughts, like not thoughts, but having to think critically yourself. So you don't have to depend on yourself to make difficult decisions. And also you don't have to live with the responsibility. People like being able to be like, well, let's get rid of that guy. He was the one that fucked it all up in the first place. So I think that people will continue to push for leaders regardless of whether or not it's good for them. So, I will never try to be a leader of the Bitcoiners though, man. Those dudes are ruthless.
Yeah.
They'll cut you down. Like you can't even make mistakes. Like you can't, like they'll just take you out.
Oh man, what they were doing to Robert Breedlove. It's like, come on. I don't know how I feel about that.
I'm in the Telegram channel, and they were even debating it back and forth in the Telegram channel, his own Telegram channel.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that conversation occur. Yeah, I think it's healthy. It's healthy. Like, I like that Bitcoin has this like autoimmune response to any sort of red flag system, just in case they're trying to do something. It definitely puts them on warning. So a lot of people don't like the toxicity in Bitcoin, but I think there's definitely a place where you don't always want to be toxic, but there, in my opinion, toxicity is super important. It's been very good for defending the network against scammers. And people say there's no community. I don't know if I agree with that statement. They're like, oh, there's no community. There's no Bitcoin community. I mean, that's kind of true, but it's not according to the ethos of Bitcoin. But you can't help. People will always coalesce around something, and that, in a sense, is a community. And people coalesce around Bitcoin. I mean, look at Bitcoin conference. Like there's like 12,000 people that came into town for that. And there's no Bitcoin community, but there's definitely communities within Bitcoin. And I think it's really important to have a system where you can help weed out people that are there for, have ill intent, or who want to take advantage of people in those sub Bitcoin communities. We won't call them the Bitcoin community, but you have developer communities, you have podcaster communities, you have Clubhouse community, you have all these different communities. And I think it's good to have some level of toxicity, because it helps to prevent people from just getting in and weeding their way in, and then affinity scamming people on the way out.
Yeah. I think the thing that makes it difficult, and I think one of the reasons for toxicity or people yammering about it, is just because of the format of Twitter. Honestly, I think a lot of that comes from that. You have a character limit. It's easy to set a fuse off than to, write a critically thinking response to someone. It's totally. so much easier to tear someone down than to defend an argument on a thing with a character limit. We got to wrap it up here, but I want to ask you one more question, because you are through and through Bitcoiner. You don't stand for shit coins. Ethereum's a shit coin in your view, from my understanding.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any use for blockchain outside of money?
No.
So I've talked to some Bitcoiners on this, and one of the things that I think about a lot, because I'm a huge fan. You know Patrick Byrne?
Yeah, remind me of that. I know that name.
He's like the CEO of Overstock. He was the original Michael Saylor. He gets no credit for it, but he never actually bought Bitcoin for the company. He just bought it himself. But he believes a lot in blockchain, because he's seen firsthand a lot of the corruption in settlement systems, where you have naked short selling. He was, going against the SEC and stuff like that in 2005. And then recently he's gone really against the election down in the States. And I don't know, where you stand on that, if you think there were fraudulent votes in there and things like that. But I think a system like that benefits from having a public ledger that kind of keeps accountability and traces things like that, versus having a corporation or a government that can kind of potentially go in and tamper votes and isn't as transparently auditable. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I mean, yeah, you obviously something that would be interesting, but it just it's cool in theory, right? Because there's a lot of different ways theoretically that you could use blockchain in theory, right? Like you talked about, the voting system would be one that would be interesting, but then you have to build all the other things around it too. You're not going to be able to, how are you going to be able to determine consensus? How are the nodes going to work? How is the system going to be set up to prevent fraud in and of itself? Because the reason why and how Bitcoin is able to do that is because it can economically incentivize people to do so. But and that's why people are willing to mine and run nodes and to work together to keep Bitcoin pure. But if you don't have that incentive model, then how do you keep, the voting system will just be corrupted another way, right?
Well, wouldn't the incentive to run a node be protection of democracy? Like people who are politically adamant, who volunteer at, voting posts, they could post a node on their phone.
I mean, it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, anything's possible.
I mean, a lot of these things
I don't mind these, like,
right?
I don't mind the like theoretical stuff. Sure.
Yeah.
But I just haven't seen anything where it works yet. It could work.
Yeah. I think the thing where I'm getting at with this is like, at one point, people looked at Bitcoin as very theoretical. I think like if you go back to the early days, there was like, oh, could this work? We don't know. It's a really interesting piece of code, but like, could it actually work? Hal Finney was like one of the first people who was like, yeah, I think it has a real possibility. But like, as time went on, the skeptics kind of disappeared and the people who had full commitment started to grow. And I think I see that playing out as for blockchain as a utility for other things as well. Now, mind you, I'm on the same page in you in the fact that like I think most of these projects are, vaporware. They have no use. A lot of these things are just better off as centralized, or they're spreadsheets. But I do think in terms of democracy, and the sad thing is like people are more enamored with, Cardano and Ethereum and, whatever, versus actually using it for something that I think would be immediately effective, which would be like a voting blockchain. Even just trying that out, no one's really doing it. People are more enamored with that stuff than actually creating something functional. And I think another thing too is like, I think it's possible to have a blockchain without that tokenized incentive. So the things that you're getting are closer to like, NFTs, individual things linked to your identity and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I think I understand where you're at though. Like you should have skepticism about these things until they've kind of proven themselves. Bitcoin, as time went on, proved itself. But I think there's a place for these things in terms of like, my investment stance on it. I trade stocks and crypto and stuff. For me, it's like,
how dare you?
Reading tea leaves. It's fun. You lose money, you make money. It's not for everyone. I don't recommend trading people. I try not to. Like, I did some TA on my channel, but it's like, unless you're going to ground people in first principles of it, like don't even bother bringing up charts, because most people are just going to be like, so what should I buy and sell? It's like, okay.
Yeah, trading is wild, man. I tried to do trading in the beginning. It's just like, honestly, it's not worth the stress alone. So
it is very stressful.
It just ends up becoming a way for, unless you're like constantly paying attention to it, it just becomes a way for people to steal your Bitcoin from you. So yeah. The thing about blockchain, man, is it's like, it's very inefficient. It's not very effective way of transporting information. And the reason that that it works for Bitcoin is because it's secured by proof of work. So I don't know how, or I don't know the technical background of, how you could make that work without, with a voting system. Like I said, in theory, it sounds great. And if someone were to make something, it's not like I would be like, well, no, you can't do that. Like, go ahead, experiment, do it. I love the experimentation of what's going on right now in the space. The only thing I don't like, is when, there's obviously people are being scammed a lot of times, because most 99.9% of these coins out there, they are all marketing hype by VC funds, and they are pump and dumps. And so they're really just in it to get as much Bitcoin as they can and then get out. They're not really there for long term. So I'm I'm very highly skeptical pretty much of anything in this field because of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like, yeah, Floyd Mayweather, Kim Kardashian promoting like shit coins to people. It's like, yeah, no shame in that for them. It's kind of
Yeah.
gross, but yeah, I agree. I think, I wish I could develop or understand code, but for me, it seems like proof of work and voting mechanisms can work really well. I mean, if you think about it, like Bitcoin, like a core tenet of Bitcoin is consensus. That's what voting is. It's consensus on choosing things and, signaling and things like that. I think a model can work. The obvious trouble is like the way that we have our voting systems now. It's like, millions of people in one day. How do you do that on a proof of work blockchain without exploding? But yeah, like I'm still extremely skeptical of proof of stake. I think that promotes,
You should be.
hoarding and power dynamics in the wrong way. But I have some Ethereum. Not keen on the proof of stake thing. But for me, it's like I own that because number go up there as well in some sense. Not in the same way, but
proof of stake will be a big number go up technology. It's like all built to help the number go up, and then the EIP 1559 that they just launched to help reduce the fees is also another number go up. Like basically everything Ethereum does, this is what's annoying about them, is like everything that they try to do is just like a way to like pump the price of Ethereum, which is like great if if that's all you care about, that's great, but that's not going to last forever. Like that kind of like view on on Ethereum is going to have long-term devastating impacts on it as a technology. But the EIP 1559 thing is totally bullshit. They're like, oh, we're going to reduce the fees, but then they like leave in a way for people to still tip the miners. Like it doesn't even make any sense. Like that doesn't fix anything because people are still going to use the tipping mechanism to get their transaction first, and then that'll get abused to the point where it'll be just like going back to the old Buterin style for fee structure.
Yeah, and I think too, like I think the thing that most people are off still, but on Ethereum was kind of the hard fork with Ethereum Classic and rolling back because they had a problem so early on. And people make this false comparison to like the Bitcoin bug in like 2010 where they made like $1 million extra or something, but it's not even the same thing because like the holder base is not similar and just the idea of the monetary policy there is different. But
did you see that guy tweeting at me about that? Or was that I was just tweeting at someone about that.
Maybe I did, but yeah, it's a false comparison for sure.
It's a ridiculous comparison.
What happened? There was no market for Bitcoin. Like you couldn't even buy or sell them back then. So it's like
literally no one was using Bitcoin, and it was a bug on Bitcoin, and so they had to change it in order to keep Bitcoin from basically falling apart. And because the guy was like, he was stealing from the network. Whereas like, okay, what Vitalik did was they all put their money into a smart contract, and then the smart contract got pillaged and got hacked. That's not the same. That's like you decided to put all your money into a like something different. It wasn't like you left it on Ethereum. You didn't leave it on the main chain. Yeah. You put it in something else. You moved it into something that's like an unproven technology. You got robbed, and so you decided to reorg the entire chain. That's a totally different scenario. I mean, that's why you have, like you said, Ethereum Classic versus Ethereum, because people didn't agree with that move.
Yeah, for sure. I have problems with all those things. One of the fun things about like technical analysis is like you can really see like the supply and demand flows of some of these shit coins. Like I consider Litecoin like a complete shit coin. That's been dead in the water for a while now, but they try and go up when Bitcoin goes up, like Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash, but when it comes down, they revert so hard back down.
Yeah. Lost you. Lost ya. Julian, where have you gone? Send you a message, everybody. All right, dude. It's all me. I'm all alone again.
Steve and Dave use eToro to trade crypto.
Well, this is fun. I'm all by myself. All right. Well, it's been fun, Julian. I knew you said you were going to be leaving soon here. I'm not getting a
Jeez.
DM from you.
Apologies.
Oh, there you
There
are.
we go.
You're back. You survived.
Sorry. I don't know. My phone's being weird. Where was I going with this? I forgot. Anyways,
we were talking about just Ethereum and Classic
yeah.
and versus Ethereum, and you said my problem. You said something about your problem with it was something, and then it cut out.
Oh yeah, no. I think like one of the reasons I like trading is trading reveals the truth in supply and demand and how things really are as well. And I think like when you see all these altcoins just get demolished on the first little Bitcoin correction, it tells you like the actual state of the market. Like nobody wants to own those, right? People are like, oh, well, Bitcoin has a bigger market cap. It's more sound money. It's just like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have less volatility necessarily. It might the bigger it gets, but it can still do 30-40% corrections. But some of these are just like getting just wiped. And it just tells you like there's no sound base of holders on a lot of these things for sure.
Yep, they're absolute garbage.
Yeah.
It's just
Fun to trade.
fun casino games, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how you
All
stay
right.
sane with the trading though, but I hope you probably just buy Bitcoin, just hold Bitcoin, man. The trading is crazy.
What? I do though. Like I roll it in, but part of it is like I have to keep money in the stock account just for fun. Like I've been doing this for like 5 years now. I made a video on it.
Yeah.
Trading is fun. It's stressful. It disconnects you from people, but I have actually outperformed Bitcoin trading. I've been one of the very lucky few, but I've rolled that into Bitcoin and a lot more this year. I think Michael Saylor was the moment where I was like, okay, I don't mind holding like 70% of my net worth in this. Like, fuck it. But I think a large part is like one of the things is people always say like hodl, hodl, hodl. It's like it's so easy to do that when you have other streams of income, and it's just like all these VCs and all these Twitter influencers like, well, it's easy because like if you have enough wealth, you're Jason Williams, like it's so easy to recommend hodl. But the people around me that I've told that with, they're always getting cold feet, and I'm like, God, you just got to stop. But part of you also has to have that empathy a little bit that like some people are they want to cash that out and spend it before they die, right? So but yeah, low time preference or high time preference is the best.
Jason Williams is a trader, though, dude. Did you know that? He trades all the time.
He trades? Well, he has his own like capital fund, right? But
he plays games at the crypto markets like all the time. He calls it extracting value. So he'll like pull money out of all the other coins and put it into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I saw recently he's like, I don't know if he like mines ETH, but like every time he buys Bitcoin, it's like him selling ETH. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know he was like that deep into it, but.
Yeah, he's all over the place with stuff. I think he does mine all other coins as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting.
He's a funny guy. I really want to talk to him. There's a lot of people who like. One of the things I like about the Bitcoin space too is like a lot of entrepreneurs. Like you said that you own like a fitness studio. Oh, sorry, I was gonna end this, but we'll keep it going a little bit longer. My data is. I got another couple minutes.
We're alive. We got it.
Yeah. What's the story behind that with like owning a fitness studio? Because you said you wanted to get into that more and you ended up becoming like business owners on that. Like how did that work?
So it started off with my partner. She was a fitness instructor, and then she migrated. Well, she saw what the business owner was doing there and was just like, you know what, I can do a way better job of this. So that's when she decided to start making the move towards opening up. And the first year was absolute hell. We ended up like firing the person that we started it with, and that was just like a nightmare. And then, I mean, now we're like 5 years in, but we've got 2 locations. We were going to open a 3rd location, but then COVID happened, so that was a big damper on everything. And then we launched online. Well, I should say she did, because that's why I started doing kind of the podcasting and everything, because I don't really have to work on that project anymore because she has a whole whole team. But she launched a online version of her fitness studios, which is doing really, really well. And then now she's also launched a supplement brand as well. So she has a pre-workout that she's selling and doing a really good job at. So it's been been great watching her do it, because it's kind of giving me also some like blueprint for how to do an online business.
Yeah, I think like when I see a lot of Bitcoiners on Twitter and stuff, it seems for the most part they're either in the technology space somehow, either as like, coders or working at like big tech firms, or they're entrepreneurs. And like I think a lot of the media is aimed towards those audiences rather than like, it's funny because they use the term plebs, but like most people in the Bitcoin space are not plebs in that sense, right? Like they're financially well off, they have multiple streams of income, things like that. But yeah, it's interesting how it obviously attracts entrepreneurs and stuff like that. Like for me, it's so different. I have a video agency where we do like commercials and stuff, and that was because I was in film school, wanted to go to Hollywood, all that, but thought better to kind of just be my own sovereign individual and do that. But then like after COVID, I actually saw a huge uptick in my business, and it was like I didn't have to do anything. I cut all my marketing off, and it was just all this natural demand for e-commerce videos. But the problem is like I couldn't figure out how to train and hire people. So I had this cash flow coming, but I couldn't really scale it up. And so my options were like, well, I have the cash flow, I have nothing to do with it. So I decided to put it basically into Bitcoin a lot in like June 2020. And then I did like another round on this dip right now. But it's interesting. It changes your outlook when you're running a business too. That's one of the interesting things about Bitcoin is well, obviously like Michael Saylor brought that to the forefront, but
Right.
running a business now, and now your end goal is not profits and capital accumulation. And, if you have shareholders paying them out, it can be like accumulate as much Bitcoin because it's basically like a land grab,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's very much like a land grab. Yeah. I see it that way.
yeah.
I think that's a lot. I think that's how once you get to that place, that's like the best place to be at is like, there's only 21 million, like there's like almost 50 millionaires on the whole planet. So like not even every millionaire on the planet can own a whole Bitcoin. And that's just like how incredibly scarce it is.
Yeah.
But I think we're still so early, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Bitcoin's addressable marketplace is like hundreds of trillions of dollars. And in my opinion, I think we're going to at least see multi-million-dollar per Bitcoin, if not up to $10 to $20 million per Bitcoin in the next like 20 years.
I think one of the things, okay, we'll end on this note. One of the things that I think I brought up in one of the clubhouses that we had or the Twitter spaces was like, okay, so we have this world where Bitcoin is, denominated at like hundreds of thousands of dollars. All of these millionaires and billionaires are like millennials. Some of them are, the Winklevi, some of them are Chamath. They kind of know how to, allocate capital. But a lot of the people that own these, that own Bitcoin are just plebs. Like I follow this one guy named Isaac on YouTube, and he made this video of like, oh, Bitcoin hit $100, and it went viral, this year, and he's got to be worth like millions of dollars. And he's, he runs businesses and stuff. But there's a lot of people who like, I would say arguably are going to come into a large amount of capital that don't really know how to allocate it. How do you see that world playing out where you have these a completely different class of millionaires than we've ever had, like really young people who don't come from probably pretty wealthy backgrounds?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be great to see the way that people allocate capital. I think that Bitcoiners are some of the most critical thinkers on the planet. So if you give money in the hands of people who can critically think and they're able to allocate that capital, then it's probably going to find better uses for that capital. So that's kind of what we were talking about earlier in a Bitcoin world. I just think it's interesting because people are going to be less likely to spend it on, frivolous investments or moonshots, because the money that they do have goes up 200% on average per year. They're not going to just invest it in anything, right? But there are going to be better opportunities out there than Bitcoin. They're going to be opportunities that have a potential to return more. So eventually there's going to be a time and place when I think people are going to look for things to invest into, but that's also good because it's going to drive, innovators. It's going to drive people on the ground who are looking to create a company. They're going to have to ask themselves, like, I'm going to have to create something
that
so
returns
good.
more than Bitcoin.
I'm going to have to come up with something so good that I can peel Bitcoin away from these Bitcoiners. Like I'm going to have to come up with some really good ideas. So
yeah,
I think it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see what people come up with. I'm really excited about it. Actually, personally, I'm so excited about Bitcoin, right? I'm like, this is going to be amazing. Bitcoin's going to change the world. But like, honestly, like 100 years from now, like that's going to be the time to be alive. like the stuff that we're going to start creating and inventing, like based off of what we start creating and inventing in the next 10, 20 years, like that's what's really going to be crazy. But we'll be dead before the last Bitcoin is mined. So
Yeah, well, that's why it's good that you're focused on health, right? You want to be
yeah,
alive to see the day.
maybe I can freeze my brain or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll end on this question. So yeah, like as you said, like there's a point where Bitcoin will not return as much as kind of like maybe some of these ventures that we take on. For me, the idea is like I don't have a price target in mind, but eventually if Bitcoin goes to a certain place and I have a lot of capital, I'd like to buy a lot of land and build like a community on there for like community farming and just have a place where like, if you want to not pay rent, but you're willing to work by hand and discuss ideas and have forums like this, but like in person and kind of be salt of the earth. Like I love to buy a place and let that rip. I guess sort of in a way, kind of like it's not quite the same because El Zonte is like a district, but something similar to that, where like you could have your own version of that and let it run and finance that.
Pretty cool.
What is kind of the dream for you when Bitcoin hits a certain point, or do you have one yet?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I mean, I just want to be able to keep doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think the biggest part about Bitcoin is the freedom to be able to live your life the way you want to live it. You don't have to live as a slave to the system. So I want to be able to chase the opportunities that come my way and pursue things that I want to pursue. And I think that most people have never really experienced that. I have had some level of experience with that before, especially because when I retired, I'm from my other job because of my health problems. I was kind of in a period where I had kind of fixed my health. I shouldn't say fixed, but it's quite a bit better than it was when I first started having epilepsy, having seizures. And so there was a period where I wasn't like doing anything. And it was interesting to kind of live in that space where you get to look at all the opportunities and make the decision that you want to make. And it's not done like, oh my God, am I going to feed my kids tomorrow? So I think that the whole world could really benefit from being in that space a little bit more. And so that's where I want to keep living in that space. I want to keep living in a space where I get to control my destiny and my time. And I look forward to everyone else being able to do the same.
I love it. Yep. 100%. All right. Thanks so much, Dennis. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been a pleasure. Hope we can talk again soon. And yeah, make sure I'll link down below at some point Dennis's Twitter and his podcast. But if you like this conversation, you'll love the ones where he talks to much more intellectual people than myself.
It was great. We had a really good time. Yeah, if you guys want to follow me, I'm on Twitter a lot at The Machine Built. And I have my podcast, Smart People Shit. I do some writing as well. That's all linked to everything. My Substack's all linked and everything. But it's I have an Ethereum article probably coming out here soon. So
the
roast it up. Thanks for having me on, dude. I had a really great time. Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. Take care, Dennis. Hope to see you in El Zonte soon.